in 1930s Denmark, a company was founded that would change the way entire generations of kids would grow up. That brand, that company was called Lego. And from the very outset, Lego proved itself to be a company committed to reinvention and adaptation, evolution in the face of change. In the early days, in fact, Lego used to use timber to make its toys. But in World War II, when timber became too expensive, they started to look for alternatives, and they were one of the first toy makers to invest in a plastic injection molding machine. And they invented their trademark rod and stick blocks, the blocks that we all know today. And yet over the coming years, other people came into the market, started, I guess, copying Lego's ideas. And so Lego realized the need to reposition their brand. And over the years, they went from making just simple blocks to entire play sets. And then a few years later, released the Lego figurine, which allows you to bring those play sets to life. And these innovations over the space of 3 or 4 decades put Lego in a position where they dominated the toy market until shift happened. And the shift for them was technological in nature. You know, in the early to mid 1980s, kids started playing not with Lego, but video games. And of course, the challenge for Lego was this: how do they compete with video games when their toy range was essentially a tangible, non-digital experience? And for about 11 years straight, Lego went into a losing streak. In fact, in one 2-year period, Lego lost $500 million. They were in serious trouble. And in order to combat the threat of the digital age, Lego's strategy was somewhat informed by that notion: if you can't beat them, join them. And so Lego decided to release their own range of video games. They've reinvented their product range to take it into the digital arena. More recently, they've developed online multiplayer virtual universes where you use Lego figurines to play people from around the world. They've even developed smartphone apps where you can build Lego shapes on your phone while sitting on the bus. You know, in fact, what's interesting about Lego is they haven't just done the digital thing, they've also stayed in the tangible world too. Their most recent reinvention was in fact a range of toys called Lego Friends, designed for girls. And as of mid-2012, half of Lego's revenue came from toys sold for girls, a whole market they'd never really tapped into in the past. You know, what an amazing company that's reinvented and repositioned itself consistently and stayed ahead of the curve. What can we learn from their experience? There's probably a number of things that any business or brand can, because what Lego has done is repositioned itself by developing new products, adopting new approaches, new techniques, and exploiting new markets as times and needs have evolved. And when I'm working with clients, helping them reposition themselves in the face of change, just as Lego has done, there are 7 questions I tend to run through with clients. I want to give these 7 questions to you now and encourage you to spend some time reflecting on them for yourself. The first question in repositioning any business or brand is simply this: what is it that motivates or impresses our marketplace? What do they actually really want? And you know, it is critical, absolutely key, that you find out what that is rather than falling back on assumptions. And a good example of the danger of this is the cake maker Sara Lee. In the early 80s, Sara Lee developed a range of cake mixes which they figured would be perfect for the time-poor mother. And these cake mixes just required the user to add water. They released this range of cake mixes and no one bought them. After a number of months, Sara Lee went to their marketplace and said, "What's wrong with our cake mixes?" And by and large, women basically said, well, you know, if I'm going to make a cake for my family, I want it to feel like it involves a little bit of skill, a little bit of love, a little bit of attention. If it's just add water, it's so convenient, it feels like a cop-out. And basically, this feedback forced Sara Lee to go back to the drawing board to change the design of their cake mixes. So now you had to add eggs, milk and butter. Far more skill required for those 3 things. But that was absolutely key in finding out what their market wanted. When they re-released the range of cake mixes, they sold literally like hotcakes. So the first question is this one here: what does your market really want, as opposed to what do you assume that they want? The second question is the very opposite. What is it that confuses, disappoints, or frustrates your marketplace? Now again, don't fall into assumptions. Go and ask them. Number 3, who else is currently solving their problems? And this is the question of benchmarking. You know, if people are going elsewhere to have their needs met, why are they going there and not to you? And what can you learn from the success formulas of that competition? Number 4, how are we currently seen or perceived? When people think about your brand, what do they think? And if it isn't accurate, the challenge is, how do you inform that opinion? The next question is this one here: how are we a category of one? How do you do things in a way that is so unique, so differentiated that no one else can say they do it just like you? Because the marketing adage is so true, the old adage that it's better to be different than better. And yet so many times businesses are busy falling over themselves to try and be better than the competition, where it's at in repositioning is being different, finding a niche. The next question is where are the gaps? Where are the gaps? Who's currently not being serviced in the marketplace where you could actually move into that place and dominate it? And the seventh question, the final question, is this one here. What are your market's unknown future needs? I often like to refer to this seventh question as the Steve Jobs question, because this was the genius of Steve Jobs in consistently repositioning Apple to always be just ahead of the marketplace. Steve Jobs was always building products and finding solutions for consumers before the consumers even knew they had the problem that that product or that solution solved. And this is the key. If you're going to be enduringly relevant in the years to come, how do you be just ahead of the marketplace? Because if you can do this, they will beat a path to your door. Well, I hope these videos have been a useful chance to, look at some tips and strategies and techniques for reinventing the way you do things in the coming years and winning the battle for relevance. For more information, feel free to check out my website, michaelmcqueen.net. On there you'll find a number of other video posts, book reviews, articles that will build on a few of the key themes we've discussed over these 6 videos. But as we draw our time to a close, I want to leave you with a quote that brings together so many of the themes that we've discussed over this series. And it's a quote from Charles Darwin, when Charles Darwin said this: "It is not the strongest that survive, nor is it the most intelligent. It is those who are most responsive to change." I want to wish you all the very best as you navigate the changes ahead and look to reinvent yourself in order to stay relevant.